Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Lynn. It is indeed my pleasure to be here. This has been 2 years in coming. I remember when we had to postpone last year, I thought, okay, Lord, I was nervous already. I thought I knew what I wanted to say. I have a feeling you're going to give me a few more things, and boy, did he. And you will hear a couple of them this weekend. But it's such a treat, even just to be on campus. I do almost everything remotely now because of the pandemic. So I'm not used to seeing so many faces, and you all are smiling. Thank you. So tonight, we're going to be, starting things off. Love the theme. Don't you just love hope? That word is such a hopeful word. Wouldn't you agree? And I'm hoping that during this weekend, something I say to you, something the Lord puts on my heart to say to you, allows you to have renewed hope, to feel completely refreshed and excited about what God is going to do in the seasons that we look forward to, because we do, don't we? We have our pet seasons, but there's some that we don't look forward to as much. And I really want you to see how God can use any season that you happen to be in. So even as we reflect on the seasons, I want to just remind you, okay, I'm doing the clicking thing. They told me it was going to work. Oh, it wasn't on. I hope you can edit that out of, right. Okay. I'm supposed to be looking professional. You heard all the titles and things that Okay, so, when I was preparing this presentation, I thought, okay, how should we start? Which season should we start with? And we're still officially in the winter season, aren't we? But I think we have some hope that some of those flowers we're seeing that look artificial will manifest into real life flowers outside not too long from now. And that's an exciting thing. So we have to think about seasons. I think I'd like you to start thinking about seasons in a different way. We know what they look like in nature. But what you maybe haven't done yet is thought about what can you learn from the seasons that God would want to do in your lives. What's the spiritual implication of the seasons? Maybe when you were preparing to come to the presentation, you thought, hope for all seasons. I wonder what season I'm in. Okay, well, I sure had to think about that. And I wanted to try to help you to have a sense of what season you're in. When you look at your life, you tend not to look so much at the season when you're in it. Have you noticed that? Don't you notice you do more reflection and you look back and then you think about how you felt about what just happened? Well, I want to ask you to be more mindful. I don't know if you know that term, but it really just boils down to what's happening right now. Can you focus on right now and where you are now? I'd love you to start at that place. Where are you? Which season are you in? What does that mean for you? Because if you don't pay attention, you might miss some of the lessons that God would want to teach you. So let's think about the seasons. How does your life story show up in seasons? We're going to be doing a lot of reflecting this weekend. I'm reflecting. I have been reflecting. I've thought about times in my life. I'd like to share some of them with you, but I do know that there are seasons that I've recognized growth in that some haven't seemed as, growth didn't necessarily happen in those, but I'd like to pay more attention to the ones where growth may have happened. And think about what helped you grow. Was it the seasons that you really like, the fun ones, or was it the one that seemed harder? Anybody here have a favorite season? Mine is, guess what? Spring. Because I love flowers. So, anybody else have a favorite? I've heard fall, people like fall and the leaves, and they're so pretty and they're crunchy when you step on them, and I've heard all these things. But right now, we need to figure out what has God been doing in the spring, in the fall, in the summer, and the winter of our lives. What have we learned? Have we learned anything? As each season arrives, did you realize that something was taken from the new one? Did you realize they overlapped? You may not have. I want you to think about that. Think about that from the spiritual sense. If you think about the seasons that you can identify of your life now, was anything there lingering from the previous one? Did you have anything that was brought into the new season? If you did, it means that the one that came before, God was trying to show you something to prepare you for the one that was coming. Do you see how we could end up not seeing what God was saying because we weren't paying attention? Do you see how we could miss out on what God wanted to put in our lives, to invest in our lives, to touch us with, so that we could touch others? Because we're just living and just trying to cope. Trying to cope. Doesn't that sound like a familiar refrain? Anybody been trying to cope in the last couple years? I thought you would relate. Yeah, but did you think about what came before? Did you think about what led you into a season where you felt like you had to try to cope? Did you realize what God had been doing before then to prepare you for that season? You didn't, did you? Well, thank God for this presentation, because I sure learned a lot. I'm hoping that you also will over this time that we're together. So winter, spring, summer, fall. Mulching. Anybody mulches? So do you know we don't really do that in Jamaica? I'm not sure why. Maybe we don't need to. You might notice I have an accent. I'll tell you about that later. Mulching is something that I realized I need to learn how to do that, especially since I like flowers. But think about mulch and the role it plays in seasons. Do you realize that if winter leads into spring, then into summer, then into fall, and there's something that was preparing for the next season, they're like mulching for each other. Something is happening in each season, preparing for the next one. And what does mulch do, really? Have you thought about that? It actually facilitates growth. It makes it hard for things that would take away from growth to happen, like weeds. It actually makes it easier for flourishing and growth and nurturing. That's what's happening between those seasons, if you think about it. Something is happening in winter that allows spring, that allows summer, that allows fall. I'm hoping all of you are thinking, because that's what I was trying to. So, the seasons, they are like summer, fall, winter, spring. They have emotions. They have joys or dreams are associated with what is coming in each season. We have anticipation. We have sometimes regret. We have sometimes sorrow and sometimes hardship. But they all feed each other, and God is trying to feed us through each of those experiences. Each season becomes something that was a preparation for the other. Did you remember how seasons began? Anybody remember when all of that became a thing, like in the Bible, in those days? Well, even if the word season wasn't used, remember Noah's story? Anybody remember? So we have an idea. We probably have in all types of versions read it. Noah, yes, the ark, 2 by 2, yes, the went out, the flood. Everybody thought he was crazy, etc., etc. He was out there forever, and then finally, the flood receded. What happened at the end? Does anybody remember? Do you remember what God said to Noah and to mankind at the end? Genesis 8:22. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. Those are seasons, aren't they? Did you remember that? Did it occur to you that's when the whole season thing became a thing? You know what? That was a long time ago. That was a promise. God made that promise to Noah and whoever else happened to be listening at the time. Because we have that recorded word in the scripture, that promise became ours as well. I assume that all of you took that promise to heart, because you wouldn't go out and buy all that mulch, you wouldn't do all that pruning, you wouldn't if you did not believe what God said. You wouldn't be preparing, would you? And it means that you took him at his word. That was in nature. What about in... Let's talk about how he makes promises to us. Choose which ones to believe. Yeah, I have a habit of saying things that make people think. Well, you know, first it started with me. I had to do it. So obviously, I'm going to pass it on to you. But I did look at that promise that God made to Noah and think to myself, doesn't everybody believe that promise, even people who aren't saved? It's not, the world isn't divided into, okay, the Christians are preparing for the winter, but the non-Christians aren't because they don't believe in God and they don't believe what he said in the word. Have you noticed that? That even people who don't believe in God prepare for seasons. What does that tell us? It tells us that we pick and choose what to believe. God made that promise and he kept it. There are many, many other promises in the scripture. The question is, do you believe them? Have you been believing them? And if not, why not? So, I'm wondering why you all are here, by the way. So that video that we watched, the 30 years, it was wonderful. It really touched me. I only came one previous year, so for those of you who've been here all along, that's just such a lovely way to remember what you have been trying to do here. I know you come with expectation, and I think you should, because God is here. And if he's here, and you want something from him, you're going to get it. But what are you hoping for? I believe you're here because you need a little more hope. You have some, but you need some more. You had enough to get here, but you need some more. Maybe you need some more in the times when it's harder to hope. Do you believe that God can renew your hope no matter what season you're in? I heard a couple of amens and nods. Okay, well, maybe the season you're in right now is okay. Maybe it's not terrible like some that I've been in. I have to tell you, yeah, I'm the keynote speaker, but that doesn't mean that I always believe that I will have hope in very, very difficult times. I've had my moments of not having hope. I have succumbed to doubt and fear. Is there anybody else? Okay. I just thought I'd get that clear. So, my journey, let me just tell you a little bit. You're looking at me here on the stage. You're thinking she came from Jamaica. They have sunshine and things all year, right? Why is she here? I've heard that question so many times. It's like, okay, so why would you leave there to come here? Well, you know, it's fascinating, really, that God always intended for me to be here, and it's so obvious. Let me tell you just a little bit of that. So having done what needed to be done for me to get to this place, wine burner included, I came hopeful because it was a wonderful new experience, new opportunity I was able to use. I had been studying. I had been preparing to do certain things. I was getting to do them. Wouldn't that be great? Then I had prepped my husband, who is my personal assistant, thank God for him, and said, if you don't come, I ain't going. And he said he'd come, so what would I complain about, right? And I came. And I came into an environment where, in my whole life, I have to say, I've never worked with such wonderful people who are full of the Spirit, who love the Lord, and whom I love, right, Amy? As I do now. I mean, that is the truth. I'm not trying to make anybody feel good, okay? So God did certain things to me that made it really hard to say no. That warmth, the welcome that I've experienced since I've been here, this is year 5, by the way, it was so obvious that it was him who did this, and even now, it was so obvious that all that he had been doing previous to this was for this. But when I came, I arrived in Findlay on January 2nd, 2017. And let's just say you weren't having the worst weather, but you weren't having the best. I had left Jamaica where traditionally in the winter, the skies are the bluest. The breeze is the coolest. The sun shines every day. And since I love flowers, you know, I like sunshine and blue skies and those things too, right? But when I came and I saw the gray clouds and the stick trees, so I was not new to the United States of America. I had been visiting since I was 8. So all of that caused me to reflect because I'd been to the States so many times on vacations, you know, okay, let me go here, there. I even came to Chicago one winter because I was ready to see snow, and I figured, okay, if I'm going to see snow, it's going to be in Chicago. I need on the ground. Just to, hey, I mean, we needed a memory. But I had done that, all those things as a visitor. And if you're visiting, then you're going to go home and talk about the trip you had and how fun it was. When I came on January the 2nd and realized that the stick trees were going to be my view for the next few months, and the bleakness, oh my goodness, who told the sun not to shine for 2 weeks? How does that happen? Well, I had never been to Ohio. So I came, and it wasn't even so much the cold, because you know you wear the right clothes. It was just the bleakness, and then I said, okay, well, at least when it snows, hopefully I'll cheer up, because when I watched the Hallmark movies, people looked really happy. They were making snow angels, snowball fights, and I said, okay, well, at least I have that to look forward to. I had hope. And then the snow fell, and it fell on my face. And I thought to myself, this is a real prayer. I said, God, Who did you think would appreciate this kind of weather? I'm telling you, I love when I do a presentation and my husband is here because people think I make things up and I don't. And he can confirm that I was so annoyed. I hated the snow. It was the worst. Thank you. Because all these people are going around looking happy and carefree, like it wasn't a problem. It looked pretty, but that's not enough. So what I'm trying to explain to you is the torture that I experienced as I came into the place that God sent me. And by the way, nobody told me that during the winter you get shocked by everyone and everything, including. And I don't even need the explanation about using the dryer sheets and whatnot, because I've tried all that and it doesn't matter. Please know this. I had to process, but I really felt this was God. I mean, I reflected on all the steps that led up to me being there. I reflected on everything that had assured me that this was a good season, you know, one of the good ones that you can just smile all the way through. And there was not, it just was not enough. I was in deep sorrow. I remember I had a colleague that she became, I confided in, and I had so much guilt about how much I despised my life. I had guilt how blessed I was. I didn't even know, how do you explain this to people? Oh, you know, the Lord gave me this wonderful job in Findlay, Ohio, and I just hate the snow. They just wouldn't get it. And then he said, well, it's not so bad. Oh, this is fine. So it's not even like I had any company at home complaining with me. So I had to find a friend who is a pastor. You know, even if she didn't really understand, she had to act like she did. And I cried. I was so depressed. You know how long I was depressed for?
All winter.
It continued. It continued because I didn't feel like I could fit into this different life. So even when spring came, and that was reassuring, and by the way, marine biology was my major, botany was my minor. The reason I'm saying this is because when the little buds came on the trees, I was like, oh, look, the stick trees have leaves. I really, just to see it happen was like a miracle. I knew it was supposed to happen. I've heard it happens, but I had never witnessed the transformation. I saw the change for the first time because that doesn't happen in Jamaica. We have the same trees, same flowers, same grass, same everything all year. So it really did remind me of that promise. It really, really did. I saw it happen, and I know you all don't get it because you've seen it from you were children. But even the hope that I received from seeing the dandelions that you all call weeds, but they're flowers to me, it wasn't enough. I was so depressed. I was in such deep sorrow and deep grief. And I really did have to keep it, you know, I just didn't want to sound like I was complaining. And it lasted pretty much close to a year. And when I would tell people, when I would confide in them, they would say, really, I wouldn't have thought that. But I just knew I had to do what I had to do. I had to cope. So even though that year encompassed winter, spring, summer, fall, it was a season for me. I had to do a lot of reflecting. I had to talk to the Lord a lot of times. I had to try to understand, why did he ask me to give up what was good for me? Sunshine, going to the beach. That's not a lake that has gross things in it. No offense. There were so many things that were so good for my soul that I had given up. And I'm not the type who would do it for the job and it's okay. I'm not the job type. Yeah, I know I seem like I do a lot, but I could take vacation forever. And that's what God was asking me to do. And it so happened that we moved to somewhere where you have to take at least 2 flights to go back home, not one, like in New York or Atlanta or Florida. Believe you me, if it was just one, I would have gone back home. It was too complicated. You have to drive 2 hours to the airport, then you have to take 1 flight. It just was too complicated to try to organize. So I got stuck. I'm not joking. This is true. All of this is true. And I was angry at God. How could he? How could he do this to me? He tricked me. He made it seem like it was a nice, wonderful season of rest after going through all the challenges I had in my previous life, and it wasn't. It was one of the hardest seasons of my life because I couldn't even justify my grief. I couldn't explain it. I wouldn't be able to get people to say, okay, well, take this medicine and it will go away. He restored my soul. I don't really fully know when. I know it started to happen when our 2 children, who are grown-ups, adults, wanted to live where we were. I had been so lonely before. I had wonderful friends, but I was so alone. And then God allowed me to go back to Jamaica for a vacation. And within about half an hour of being there, I knew, okay, well, this isn't home. Shocking, isn't it? That sealed it for me. That was no longer my home. It was so obvious. That's when my season ended, because I could finally agree with God and receive what he was trying to give me, instead of fighting and complaining and regretting things that were good and not being willing to embrace the gifts, the many gifts that he had given me. And then I started to love Findlay, Ohio. I love Findlay, Ohio. And when the winter comes, do you know that I'm almost trying not to make the winter end yet? Because there's still a couple winter things I wanted to do. What a transformation. And guess what? I have the hope of spring. But the season that I wanted you to hear me say, that was winter. It was dark. It was full of regret and sorrow. It felt hopeless. It felt like I was being punished. But I think for a moment I forgot who God was. I forgot that the promises that he had made from the beginning of time were for me. I forgot that he said, because of what I was seeing, it didn't mean it was good. I forgot, or maybe I didn't even know yet, who God was and who he wanted me to be. Why are you here? I'm hoping that you can reflect on such a season. Why? Because those are the ones that really need attention. The ones that you can't wait for it to be over. Feels like God isn't good, like he doesn't really love you, like he said. I want to reassure you of who God is today, because I want you to remember it while you're here this weekend. The word of the Lord, such a comfort. It's full of truth, and that truth applies to every single one of us if we choose to believe it. Isaiah 55:10-11. Yet just as from the heavens the rain and snow come, they come down and do not return there till they have watered the earth, making it fertile and fruitful, giving seed to the one who sows and bread to the one who eats. So shall the word of the Lord be that goes forth from his mouth. And it shall not return to him empty, but it shall do what it was meant to do, achieving the end for which he sent it. Anyone here who it feels like it's painful and you're afraid to tell the truth to people because they're going to say, "What's wrong with you? Look at how blessed you are." I want you to know the word of the Lord to you is the bleakness, the sorrow, the regret. It has a purpose. It is designed to do something that's going to prepare for the season to come. It is not a punishment. It is not something coming from this cruel Heavenly Father who says he's good, but I'm not sure he really is. It is a God who heard your prayer when you said, "I want to be used by you, Lord." He can't use people who are having summertime all the time. He can't use Karen, who did not yet go through a bleak and dismal winter. Where does his power come from? Where does the hope come from? The fact that he takes you from that bleak place to somewhere where you can rejoice again and see him as he is. And as he always was. He was in the midst of the bleakness and the clouds and the snow that touched my face. He was in the midst of my loneliness and my sorrow. He wanted to be there with me. And I was pushing him away. Wait for it. And it wasn't until I was able to say, "No, God, you must be good, even though it doesn't feel that way." And it wasn't until I started to push through and try to find him in the midst of my sorrow that I saw that he was always there. Ladies, think. Don't waste this opportunity. Think. What have you gone through? Because if you are alive on this earth, the earth we have to live on right now, you must have had those moments. I want you to think, what was he saying to you? What has he been saying to you? What do you need to hear him say to you? Because his word shall not return to him void. Thank you, ladies.